I guess just to get started, hopefully y'all see my screen. Just want to welcome you to the webinar today. My name is Marco Sanchez. For those of you who I have not met, I'm a communications manager at PEC, and I'll go through a few logistics in a moment. But before that, obviously it's a very difficult time for everyone in light of COVID and everything else that's been going on. It feels a bit weird for me to say this week, but I think it's also important to find and hold on to the things that are really positive in the world. And I, for one, am really thankful that I get to get up every day and work for an organization that's trying to make the world a better place. And I've been here for a handful of years, but our work has never felt more relevant. So that's very exciting. Now more than ever, people are looking for local food options. Could be because they're having a difficult time finding food at the grocery store, or they want to know where their food's coming from, that it's being handled safely. And they also might be relying on food assistance to feed themselves if they're out of work. So today you'll hear from a variety of PEC staff who are working together to help strengthen our local food systems, both for the immediate needs and for the long-term resiliency of our region's agricultural economy. So you'll hear from John McCarthy, Matt Coyle, Dana Melby, and Mike Kane, and our president, Chris Miller, is also on today. I'll let them introduce themselves when they go to speak. All right, so again, we'll have 4 panelists. Chris will provide a few comments at the end, and then we'll be taking questions. So just some housekeeping. Again, as is the case with maybe some of you, we're getting used to Zoom, so just bear with us on any technological hiccups. If you have any questions, please use the chat box. You can access it by taking your cursor to the lower portion of the screen, typing those in. If there are technological questions or questions about the content of the presentation, I'll be sort of paying attention to those and taking them after we're done. Our talk should last about 35 minutes, and then we should have some time for you guys to engage and provide comments and questions. So that being said, I know most of you are very familiar or somewhat familiar with PEC, but for those of you who aren't, we've been working for almost 50 years to protect the Piedmont's natural resources, rural economy, history, and beauty. And we cover a 9-county region, ranging from Loudoun and Clark County in the north down to Charlottesville and Albemarle County, but we also are engaged in issues statewide, regional, and national levels that impact work we do here at the local level. How do we do that? We engage, educate, and empower residents around a whole host of issues, including land conservation, good land use planning, local food and sustainable agriculture, public access to parks, trails, and open space, water quality, wildlife habitat protection. And we do that through on-the-ground projects, advocacy, and outreach. So I'm very excited for you all to hear from our staff today. And I think without further ado, I will turn it over to our first speaker, John McCarthy. So bear with us just one sec while I stop sharing my screen and hand it over to John. So John, you should be good now to go ahead and do that.
Okay.
So it should be in the lower, if you take your cursor and scroll to the bottom of the screen, there's that green, there you go.
All righty.
Wonderful.
Now, are you seeing the screen that says PEC and local food?
I am. Just go ahead and click the present button, and then you'll be good to go. There you go.
Clearly, I need a younger person to maintain my relationship with modern technology, and Marco is the guy. Thank you, Marco, very much. Some of you may be asking, why does PEC have an interest in local food? And some of that is intuitive, but some of it is not. And so I'll explain a little bit by saying that the general philosophy is that conservation is the bread and butter of what PEC does. But conservation is only one part of the equation. There has to be a viable economic return for rural property owners. How do we maintain that viable economic return? So PEC has a long history of working with local food. Sorry, a little too fast. 15 years, in fact, of supporting local food through a variety of efforts, some of which you may be familiar with. Our Buy Fresh, Buy Local program is ubiquitous. We put out a guide every 2 years targeting 3 different regions of the Piedmont with access to local food, connecting people to their farms, finding ways to get local food into people's homes is a big part of that effort. And my colleague Matt Coyle is going to be talking about advances in that program in a few minutes. We've also worked a lot with regenerative soil health and water quality improvement. Our partner Mike Sands there and is on the picture at the bottom. We've also worked with Farmland Access, what we occasionally jokingly refer to, but very lovingly, as farmer speed dating, where we connect local producers who are looking for a place to produce their products with rural property owners who don't have a current economic return on their property and try to make those things work. And we also obviously most particularly have invested in the community farm at Roundabout Meadows that my colleague Dana Melby will be talking about in just a few minutes. Oh boy, just too fast. Sorry. The COVID-19 crisis has made very clear that we have problems with our food supply. The scale, consolidation, waste, and the challenge between local versus efficiency are the 4 broad areas of concern that all of which have been brought to bear during the current crisis. Scale creates its own problems. This article from Alternet talks about how efficient monopolies controlling our food supply turns out to have been a terrible idea. The more you concentrate production, in this case animal processing, the more limitations you have when anything goes wrong with that supply chain. Similarly, there have been a lot of efforts, and this is not a new idea, there have been a lot of efforts, bipartisan efforts, to disaggregate the food industry. Most particularly at the moment, there's a bipartisan legislation called the PRIME Act. It's an attempt to empower local beef and pork and also poultry producers to enable them to make more local processing to meet consumer demand. This aggregation into big national and indeed multinational companies has so many problems in terms of points of failure. America's slaughterhouses aren't just killing our animals. This article from The Atlantic talks about the fact that not only is animal health compromised, we tend to think about slaughterhouses historically having problems with things like salmonella outbreaks. But increasingly what we also have is in the people who are working those slaughterhouses being affected by coronavirus outbreaks. And they're not able to maintain that food supply to the public. When a single meat processing company controls up to 10% of all of pork or all of beef production through a series of several plants, if those plants start to go down and the normal distribution networks that sustain those plants and connect them to the consumers are not able to function, we all feel it in our grocery cases pretty immediately. Who ends up paying? Unfortunately, this is largely a rural problem because most of the processing facilities in the United States are in rural areas. So there's a terrible disproportionate effect on who gets the consequences of these health results of the workers who are in those plants. Waste is the third big problem I want to talk about. You know, the trouble with those supply chains is when they don't function, what happens is not only are the animals that are being brought to those processing plants not able to be processed, but there's more animals coming behind. Increasingly, what's happening is milk's getting dumped, animals are getting, frankly, slaughtered and put into landfills rather than ending up being processed and put into people's grocery cases. All of the moral hazard that comes with that is just terrible to think about, but it's also an inevitable result of the fact that there's very little variation or very little resiliency in our supply chains. If you can figure out what that's going to mean in your supermarkets after the fact, you're going to be a wealthy person because nobody is quite sure of how this is going to affect the food supply network long term. Short term, terrible crisis, lots of people getting negatively impacted, lots of producers unable to get a return on their investment. But local works. We've shown that time and time again. This article from the Washington Post just a few days ago, in fact, talks about the meat industry supply chain is failing, but these smaller farms can still meet your needs. My response is, for a while, we need to have more smaller farms producing, more access to markets. Local matters in a lot of other ways too. Let's think about the concerns everyone has about climate change and the fact that The more our beef processing network, for instance, is structured on the way of we raise beef cattle in the Piedmont. We typically sell it at auctions and it goes west for fattening and or processing, and then often comes back east. A lot of carbon footprint involved there. It all makes a lot more sense if we could find a way to raise animals locally, get them processed locally, and get them into our consumers' networks locally. There needs to be a better way to do that. There's probably an argument to be made on a health-based or carbon basis of doing less meat production or less meat consumption, but there's certainly a great argument to make that we ought to be producing it locally and consuming it locally. So what's PEC doing right now? 3 things I'll emphasize. We're working with 4P Foods, which is a for-profit retailing operation, and the local food hub in Charlottesville, which is a nonprofit organization, to expand animal protein options to local consumers and institutions in the Piedmont. We started this work on working with healthcare institutions, trying to expand it to other institutions now, food buyers who are motivated to get a higher quality product and locally sourced. We're also starting work with the American Farmland Trust and the Rappahannock-Rapidan Regional Commission to study how to best expand local producers' direct access to markets, and we're assessing the local slaughter, processing, and storage of beef, pork, and poultry to better market and meet that consumer demand. Both of these efforts are supported not just by us, by organizations such as the Prince Charitable Trust and others, some of whom are on this call, who work to support local agriculture and food system resiliency. It's investments we have to make for the future, investments we have to make once we're beyond this coronavirus crisis. I'm going to turn next to my colleague, Matt Coyle, who's going to talk a little bit about some of PEC's immediate responses and that Buy Fresh, Buy Local effort. And I will stop share and hand it over to Matt.
Great, thanks, John. Go ahead and cue yourself up there, Matt. Wonderful.
Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Coyle. I am the Buy Fresh, Buy Local coordinator and an outreach assistant at the Piedmont Environmental Council. Relatively new to the Piedmont Environmental Council. Joined a few months ago on March 4th as an outreach assistant and the Buy Fresh, Buy Local coordinator. Initially, the bulk of my role here at PEC was to help coordinate and plan in-person events and work a little bit on local food through our Buy Fresh, Buy Local program. With all that has been happening in the world, in-person events have been canceled or postponed. And I've been fortunate enough to work almost exclusively on Buy Fresh, Buy Local and other projects that strengthen our local food system. Before PEC, just a little background on me. I started my own business called The Fresh Harvest, and it was an online e-commerce website that sold for more than 45 local farmers and producers online in our area, delivering their products straight to the customer's door. We delivered as far north as Baltimore and as far south as Charlottesville. Before that, I worked on a sustainable all grass-fed beef farm in Culpeper County, Lakota Ranch, where I learned the importance of regenerative farming, taking care of the land as well as the animals. And before that, I spent most of my career working in politics, managing political campaigns in Florida, North Carolina, and Connecticut, as well as working on Capitol Hill and serving as a special assistant to the mayor of Connecticut's largest city, Bridgeport. I'm very excited to be here at PEC and to continue to help support our local farms and strengthen our local food economy. One way we're doing that is, of course, the Buy Fresh, Buy Local campaign. It's the premier trademark of the local food movement in the United States. This trademark was created and coordinated by the Pennsylvania Association for Sustainable Agriculture as a way to identify and promote locally grown foods. Since 2002, Buy Fresh, Buy Local programs have been implemented by over 100 regional and local chapters around the country. PEC has been the leader in Buy Fresh, Buy Local in the Commonwealth of Virginia. That started in 2006. So for well over a decade, PEC has been leading the way in local food for Virginia, sending out, like my colleague John mentioned, a print guide to all 3 of our chapters once a year to all 90,000 homes and supporting our local farmers in that way. In addition to the print guides, we're now working on digitizing our Buy Fresh, Buy Local print guides for folks who would like to find local farms on their computers or smartphones. We've also made last year's Buy Fresh, Buy Local guides good through the end of this year. So to offer something new this year to our supporters, we have partnered with an online software program called Market Maker. And Market Maker has led the way for integration in Virginia. This partnership has allowed us to manage all of our farmer data in one place, create maps like the one I'm about to show you, where farmers can be located. And it also provides an online platform for local farms to create a profile, to share with the public, and even sell their products online through an easy-to-use e-commerce feature. Because we've integrated this so well, other chapters and the state have followed our lead, and now we're also working on a statewide Market Maker website. But buyfreshbuylocal.org/Piedmont is the website, and you can go to it to access local food. So if someone asks you, where can I find local food in my area, please tell them to go to this website. It's great for farmers, but it's also great for local food consumers. Anyone can easily go to the website, enter their address or their location, and select a radius, whether it's 5 miles or 50 miles, to find local farms, farmers, markets, restaurants, food trucks that are affiliated with Buy Fresh, Buy Local in their area. So our 9-county region is divided up into 3 chapters: Loudoun County, the Northern Piedmont, and Greater Charlottesville. This is a long-term strategy that PEC has been working on and continues to work on to support our local farmers in the region and also help local consumers get access to healthy, fresh, locally grown foods. There's still more work to be done here. And we look forward to continuing our efforts in Buy Fresh, Buy Local to help build a more sustainable local food market here in the Piedmont. But one thing that we're working on in the short term is helping our local dairy farmers who have been hit the hardest during the pandemic. And 30 to 40% of their sales used to go to school systems. So that milk is now being spilled or wasted. And so to prevent our local dairy farms in PEC's 9-county region, we started an initiative, we're calling it the Milk Initiative, to help those farms by purchasing the milk that would otherwise go to the school system and donating it to local food banks in our area who are most in need. We had an initial goal of raising $15,000 to support the Fauquier Community Food Bank through the end of the summer with 200 gallons of milk per week. We are thrilled that we accomplished that goal in less than 24 hours with the support of our amazing donors and a $5,000 match grant from the Path Foundation. Since then, we have been fortunate in raising over $45,000 to support local dairy farmers in our region, as well as donate more than 800 gallons of fresh milk weekly to more than 16 food banks in our region, from Clark County all the way down to Charlottesville. And here's a map that shows where the food banks are and where are the local dairies that we're sourcing this milk from. We should have enough funding to keep this program going for the next 2 to 4 months. And we're also working with food banks to identify other needs, such as eggs, meat, bread, and fresh produce, to see if we can expand this program and help other local farms as well. This is by no means a long-term solution to the problems of our food system, as John talked about, but it is something we can do right now to alleviate the hardship that this pandemic has put on our dairy farmers and other farmers in the region, and also help those who wouldn't otherwise have access to fresh milk. The long-term solution is to continue the good work that we're doing through the Buy Fresh, Buy Local campaign, strengthening our regional partnerships with our farmers and with food organizations, and building a local sustainable food system that really works better for everyone. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our Community Farm Manager, Dana Melby, to share her update. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. And some of you might think that that's a virtual background in the back of Dana, but it is not. She is actually at our farm.
Yes, hello everybody. Give me 1 second here. All right, can everybody see everything clearly?
We can see you, Dana.
Great. So yes, my name is Dana Melby. I am the Community Farm Manager at Roundabout Meadows. And I am reporting to you live from the community farm. So if you see some dark clouds start coming in, please warn me because I'm trying not to get struck by lightning today. So I wanted to start off this presentation by recentering on the founding mission of the community farm, which is to grow and donate fresh produce to Loudoun food pantries. And to achieve these goals, we engage with community members, and they act as volunteers and help us with all of our production. So hunger has always existed in our community, but it is increasing exponentially with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. So how are we responding to this with the community farm? So in 2019, we grew on 1.3 acres, and we donated almost 5,000 pounds of produce. It was within our original plan to double our production this year, but with the onset of the pandemic and in response to it, we felt the need to push ourselves to triple our production, going up to 4 acres. So we will also be farming over 3 seasons this year, which last year we were just a summer market farm. And this year we'll be planting for spring and autumn as well. Actually, yesterday we got some of our fall broccoli started in the greenhouse behind me. And unfortunately, we did have to pause our volunteer programs, but I'm excited to relaunch them in the coming weeks. Hunger and the breakdown of our food system is being spoken about in the mainstream media now more than ever, and our community is responding to it. We've received a huge amount of interest in volunteering at the community farm, and we've rescheduled all of our postponed groups. They may be in different shapes and forms than they were planned to be. We were supposed to have some, 150 student group days, and so now they'll be a little bit smaller and more spread out throughout the season. But all of those have been rescheduled. In addition, we're doing everything we can to alleviate some of the burden being felt by Loudoun Hunger Relief. They've had to completely change the way they're working as a food pantry. And so we're trying to help them by packaging all of our produce for direct distribution. And as we move into the summer months and we have our tomatoes and our wider variety of vegetables available, we're planning to pack as almost like a small CSA bag. So where are we at in the season? We're in full swing. It's the first week of June. We did have a little bit of a weird spring. We came out of a very warm winter into a very cool spring with some late frosts. But we're good. We've begun donating 4 months earlier than we did last year, and we're on track right now to surpass our 2019 totals by probably the middle of July. And we're still anticipating that we'll at least triple our donations this year. So we were able to plant and donate so much earlier this year due to the installation of permanent raised beds in the autumn. These are a big part of how we're reducing our tillage and improving our soils on the farm. I know a number of you have heard me speak about, the process of taking this degraded piece of land and returning it to agricultural productivity before. But for those of you that haven't, this was a cedar field 2 years ago. And we're dealing with roots and poor soil quality. So we're working around that, and these permanent raised beds have been a great addition to our production plan. While the system is proving to be really great for our productivity, it is really labor intensive, it's really resource intensive, and it's not a good volunteer activity. I tried to do it and I thought I was gonna lose some eyeballs to pitchforks. So we've kind of just left that as a farm team, a farm team task. So because of these wonderful raised beds, we have already donated 1,000 pounds of Chinese cabbage, greens, broccoli, cauliflower, and beets. We've also donated fresh herbs and apples. So these donations have gone out to approximately 2,500 families, which is really wonderful. And we're donating every week a couple 100 pounds a week right now. And so you might have noticed that I said we donated apples, but we have apple trees on the farm now. We planted a berry patch and a small orchard this spring, but they're certainly not in production. And much like Matt, who working with the dairy farmers, at the start of the pandemic, we really wanted to have an immediate impact while our cool season crops were getting into production. You know, we were only picking about 20 pounds of greens a week, and that doesn't go, I mean, it goes to 40 people probably, but that doesn't go very far. So we were able to work with a local orchard to donate 2,000 pounds of apples. They sold us the apples at an incredibly low cost. And I think we started talking about doing this on a Tuesday or Wednesday, and by Friday we had delivered them to Loudon Hunger Relief, and they were distributed that weekend. And so where do we go from here? You know, this is a very young farm still. We are nowhere near our prime. We're not at peak production, and it will be a number of years before we are. You know, we spent a large portion of last year, you know, just getting things up and running, focusing on our facility infrastructure, me learning how to incorporate volunteers into farming, which is not something I had done before. So we're still growing, I guess is what I'm saying. And even if we achieve greatness this year, we'll achieve it even more next year. But that doesn't mean we have everything we need. You know, we don't have a farm truck. I can only do so much with my little farm use Subaru. It gets around, but, and you know, we don't have cold storage. This year we started doing a lot more lettuce production and greens production because the clients of Loudon Hunger Relief have said in the past, you know, we want more lettuce, we want more fresh lettuce because, you know, Loudon Hunger Relief relies on grocery stores for donations of produce. But when you think about that supply chain of being picked, being put into distribution, going to a grocery store, sitting on the grocery store shelf until they're decided that, you know, the customers aren't going to buy it and then they kick it off and donate it. That's a really long time. That's a matter of weeks. Whereas our timetable is, you know, we pick in the morning, we wash, and we get it there before 4 p.m. So it would be great if we had a cold storage option because we're moving into hot weather. I don't know if you guys were outside yesterday, but it was miserable. And greens don't hold up great in heat. And you know, those really wonderful permanent raised beds I was talking about that are so labor intensive, there's, you know, ways to mechanize that. And another, you know, I'm hoping by our 5th season that we'll have our full 8 acres within the deer fence into production. And we're starting to look at ways in which we can incorporate livestock. I think the great first step for the farm would be to start a laying hen operation. Fresh eggs are always in demand. It's something that we can produce and pack and distribute directly from the farm. We don't, like when raising cattle or something, we have to take that to a second party processor. We can't just take it directly from the farm to the food bank. And they're also great pest management tools. So that's kind of the quick part of what's going on the community farm. And I'm gonna transition and pass it over to Mike Kane to continue the conversation. Thank you guys.
Great, thanks, Dana. And we'll take a second here for us to transition and let Mike share his screen.
Hello, everyone. How are you all doing? Can you all see my screen? We good?
Yep.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us. And many of you know me already, but I am Mike Kane. I'm Director of Conservation at PEC. I've been at PEC for about 15 years. Mostly working on land conservation transactions, but a variety of other types of efforts at PEC as well. And part of it certainly is promoting local agriculture in our region. What I wanted to follow on with Dana's discussion of the community farm and talk a little bit about a property that we acquired, that PEC acquired about a year ago, that's right across from the community farm. This 30-acre Gilbert's Corner market property, we call it. Here's the community farm right here. So it is right across Route 50 in Loudoun County. And it's part of about 340 acres that PEC has acquired, and some of which still owns today and we manage. But we were particularly interested in this property because it had a long-standing informal market there, and we really saw it as an opportunity to complement our other work at PEC, to strengthen that market and provide people an opportunity to taste, the bounty of the Piedmont. But with the recent, COVID pandemic, our thoughts about the market took on a much more, went from more tactical to much more strategic. The important thing we're doing in light of the fact that many of our producers in the area lost their markets. And as John mentioned, our local and regional food systems are really suffering in terms of what's available at supermarkets. So we really wanted to take a closer look at how can we strengthen this market quickly. And fortunately, we had been working over the last 6 months or so as one way going forward with the market was to partner with an experienced nonprofit running farm markets. And so starting this weekend, we're really excited. The Loudoun Valley Homegrown Market Cooperative, which runs 5 farm markets in Loudoun County, including the Leesburg Farm Market, which is really one of the most successful markets in all of Northern Virginia. They're going to start managing our market for us, and not only this coming weekend, but also going forward. We think that's really a great way to formalize what we're doing there, and also to professionalize it, and also to tap into the producers and consumers that are really looking to sell and find local food products. Now, for those of you that are familiar with the market at Gilbert's Corner, there's many traditional vendors there. They will stay, including lobster and barbecue and so on. But as I mentioned, working with the Loudoun Valley Homegrown Cooperative, which I'm just going to call Loudoun Valley going forward, is we're going to be able to offer fresh eggs, much more locally grown fruits and vegetables, because they have 70 members, mostly in Loudoun, that are looking for places like Gilbert's Corner to find new venues for the sale of their products. So we're really excited to be working with them. And this is something that have been in the works for a while. The timing is really great. One of the other just particular benefits of working with Loudoun Valley right now is, if you've been following the food systems, one question has been, how can we have farm markets be a place where we can find alternative sources of food, but also in a safe way? Loudoun Valley's done a terrific job of working out what's needed to ensure that food can be offered, but that the public is safe when they come. They're doing webinars for other farm markets around the country. And one of the reasons that they are successful and we're able to adapt is because they have a full-time market manager there, which is really going to be a benefit to us as we strengthen our market at Gilbert's Corner. A second way that they've really addressed the issues raised by the pandemic is setting up an e-commerce system. So our Gilbert's Corner site will not only be the site of a farmer's market, but it'll be a site where producers can, through an e-commerce platform, accept orders and meet customers at Gilbert's Corner to pick up those products. Now, getting the right arrangement the right organizational arrangement at Gilbert's Corner for strengthening the market is part of our work there. The second part is improving the physical facilities there over time. We see a real opportunity to make an investment in the physical building, parking area, and so on that's there that really is going to improve pedestrian safety and actually allow additional vendors to operate there. So as we look at our work at Gilbert's Corner, we really see farm markets, and we hope that as part of our strengthening the market at Gilbert's Corner, it's part of this overall recognition that farmers markets really play an important role in, reimagining the food systems that we have now, helped create systems that are more diversified, regional, and resilient. I do just want to finish off our talk today and kind of bring it back to the beginning. John was talking about, PEC's work over the last 50 years, and just talk a little bit about our land conservation work and really make the connection. A vibrant rural economy and frankly, a sustainable regional food system relies on an adequate supply of clean water and a critical mass of agricultural land. All of our work on the food system side will be for naught if we don't have the resources, land and water, to help support that production. And in this regard, I would just highlight, there's a report that came out by American Farmland Trust just about 10 days ago, looking at each state and their efforts to conserve farmland in the region. And they really came out with some good data on it. But basically, Virginia has lost about 340,000 acres of farmland, agricultural land, between 2001 and 2016. I know this map is probably hard to look at, but I just drew a red circle around our 9-county area. And I think the thing just to highlight there is lots of green, lots of great productive agricultural land in our region, and also lots of red. And as usual, red doesn't mean good. Our region is particularly under threat in terms of the conversion of farmland to other uses, particularly urban and suburban uses. Since over the last 20 years, our region's lost about 80,000 acres of productive farmland. Which, just to touch on what PEC is trying to do in terms of farmland protection, our overall goal, many of you have heard this before, but just to reemphasize and make the connection to food, our overall goal at PEC is to conserve 1 million acres of the Piedmont's rural lands, particularly high quality farmland. We do that through outreach to farm operators and landowners, talking about conservation easements and other conservation options. We want to do things that make conservation a possibility for landowners, so we work at the state and local level to try and bring funding for that. And finally, we know that there is a large pot of federal funding out there to help conserve farmland. We want to bring that money to Virginia so that we can conserve more of the valuable land in our region. And if we can do those things, we can help families expand and recapitalize their operations, hopefully buy more land and conserve it, and really provide that foundation, that basis for the work that we're doing in terms of our food systems and connecting it to agricultural lands. So with that, I want to thank everyone for being with us today, and I'm going to turn it over to Chris Miller for some final thoughts, and then we're going to take some questions. Chris, can I turn it to you?
Sure. Thanks, guys. And I want to encourage people to either chat questions or we're going to turn your microphones on so that you can talk directly. And if you feel comfortable, turn your video on. I have to say, I miss seeing people in person because it's very hard to understand how you're reacting when you can't see the faces. So hopefully we'll be able to move into a conversation in a minute. The last image that Mike showed before this slide is a young woman who convinced her grandfather to enter the PDR program, Purchase of Development Rights Program in Fauquier County. And he was a former supervisor who initially had resisted the program and eventually came around to supporting it. So there's a real story behind that photograph. And from the perspective of having been at this for a while, I'm so excited about the opportunities that are starting to emerge in the conversation as we get greater public interest and greater media interest and greater interest from public officials about what needs to improve, what needs to change. So the issues we've covered briefly are just to give you a sense of what we're working on, and what we'd really like to do is open it up for any questions or discussion that people want to have. We are excited to keep moving forward, and I would like to thank all of my staff who put their time and effort, put those presentations together, but particularly to all the folks who've supported this work over the years. So with that, does anyone have any questions they want to ask? Your mics are on, I think. You might have to turn them on your computer.
You should have, everyone should have the ability to now in the lower left-hand side of the Zoom screen to click unmute.
Unmute yourself. Yeah.
I can just say, Chris, that I think the progress with Buy Fresh, Buy Local is amazing and really exciting.
Thank you, Mary Buford. It's great to see you, by the way. Hello.
Good to see you.
Yeah. It's, when it started, it was an idea. It was a brand that had been developed by folks in Pennsylvania, and we thought it might be worth trying in Virginia. I think this year we've seen why it is such a critical infrastructure for the safety of the food system. And, the anecdotal reports we get from members of Buy Fresh, Buy Local, who are also using a lot of other platforms, going to farmers markets, using their own websites, is that they're actually getting higher sales now than ever before. So the good news is, I think that providing some of these ways of people to reach the information have actually made a difference. And so we're maybe on an up curve in terms of bringing that direct return on investment to the farms themselves. But thank you for your support.
Mm-hmm.
Any other observations, thoughts?
Chris, am I live?
Yep, you are, George. Good to see you.
Very nice to see you, sir. As you can tell, I still have not made it out to get a haircut.
I made it out on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm gonna give another week or so. And then, anyway, I just want to say that was a really, really, really good presentation. Everybody on the staff did just great. It's good to see everybody there, and I'm really pleased with what everybody's doing with this. And so, yeah, let's go and keep it going. And good job, everybody.
Any other thoughts? One of the things that we've been struggling with over the last month is volunteers. And, Dana hinted at the fact that we're moving forward. The critical issue is the safety of our staff and making sure that Dana is able to farm. That's the last thing we'd want to do, is get her sick. But the secondary issue is, how do you safely bring folks who want to help, out to the farm and give them a meaningful experience. And so we're going to start in smaller groups. But Dana, maybe give some idea of what people would be doing in the next couple of weeks if they were able to come out and join you.
I'm sorry, I meant to touch on that a little bit more.
Uh-huh.
So we're hoping to move forward with our volunteer program, hopefully in about a week. I'm just trying to make sure I have all of my ducks in a row first. We do, since we're doing expanded production this year and we're planting more successions of our crops and planting our fall crops, we will have planting days going later into the season. We'll plant our brassicas out through the middle of July. So we still have that whole field to plant. We're doing a third of an acre of winter squash that we still need to plant. So there's a lot of planting left to be done. But we're also going to try to have people work with us on harvesting. We're going to have to, food safety is the most important thing. Although there's no evidence that coronavirus is transmitted through food, it's always better to be overly cautious. So we'll be working on harvesting. We're trying to expand our produce washing stations as we speak. We have it set up in the greenhouse right now, but we'll be moving over into our 3-bay run-in shed to have a little bit more workspace. So we'll kind of be back to normal volunteer slots. We have a number of groups already signed up. We're capping our group size at 10 volunteers if it's an organized group. And then for our general call to the public days, which is when I just say, hey, anybody that wants to come out, we're going to keep that a little bit smaller at 5 people just to, make sure we're metering, and hopefully we'll expand as the season goes on, but just right out the gate.
One of the neat things about the community farm is it's actually part of a group of efforts that are each slightly different variations. Just to the north, outside of Hillsborough, not Hillsborough, Round Hill, the JK Community Farm is operating on about, 130 acres? Is that right, Dana? And they've combined both produce production and some beef cattle production, and they're doing great things. They have the luxury of being well funded by their founder, Chuck Kuhn, and so they've been able to accelerate their infrastructure quite quickly. To the south of Gilbert's Corner, there's the 10-year effort at the Fauquier Education Farm, which is going great guns, and it's based on a volunteer model supported by community organizations in the county. Really productive and a great leader and mentor for us. So this is hopefully becoming part of a network of efforts, and we would like to make sure that this kind of resource is available all through our region, and we think it's a good model that can be replicated in other communities. We're certainly keeping track of how much investment we're making and how the things work, so that we can pass those lessons on to the next land trust, to the next community that approaches us. But thank you for your leadership, Dana. The first thing that she and I want to do is get the chickens out there, and we've been plotting that since February. So it actually is something we'll probably move forward with, and if anyone wants to join in that exercise, we'd love some help on that. Matt, one of the things when you started was we warned you that, outreach is a long, hard slog before you get any recognition, and you've had a chance to jump into a very visible issue. I hope you've shared, we didn't want to show you the video during this presentation. We'll share it with you by email, but, the emotion of this issue is quite strong. The food banks came to us and said, one of the things that's really missing for families, especially families with young kids, is access to milk, to dairy. And it's a part of people's expectations in terms of nutrition. And they had been used to getting it as part of the school lunch program. And they were not getting it as part of the existing programs for food support. So the emotion and the goodwill that has been created by being able to help a little bit in that area is really part of what's motivating all of us. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit further.
Yeah, I went ahead and shared the Rural Farm Network coverage of our milk initiative.
That's a national cable show that gets picked up by cable networks all through the country. So.
Yeah, so if you copy the link in the chat, you could paste it in your web browser and watch a short video that kind of explains what we're doing with the milk initiative. But the amount of support that we've received from our supporters and our donors has been incredible. And to watch, a direct impact on our dairy farmers and our food banks, it's been amazing. So this is definitely my favorite job, and it's a pleasure to do this every single day. So thank you.
One of the tough questions I've gotten from peers is, why is PEC promoting beef? Why is it promoting livestock? And that is because there's a proposition, and I guess a scientifically explained argument, that that livestock, and in particular cattle, are a big source of greenhouse gas emissions. And for us, that's a challenge because a lot of the farmland in the Piedmont is in fact well suited for pasture. We think it's a way of actually restoring soil health by increasing the quality of the pasture. And so we're looking hard at the data on greenhouse gases in cattle, and our initial research is putting a lot of weight on the transportation element. So that buy fresh, buy local piece of what we're doing and our work on regenerative agriculture may mean that cattle, if it's produced locally, are okay. But that's something that you should be aware is an issue that's we've been confronted with by the environmental community, and we're trying to work through. And I don't know if anyone in the audience has thoughts on that, but that's something that's come up in other conversations.
And I was alluding to that with my comments, which was basically to the effect that you can mitigate a lot of the climate effects of beef cattle being raised and processed if you think about how it's currently being done, which involves so much transportation of animals and the consequential effects on animal health. And there's some ethical considerations there. If you can raise it locally, produce it and process it locally and consume it locally, you're making an enormous impact on that carbon footprint.
Does anyone have any questions about that topic or anything else? Just want to make sure giving people the opportunity to say something.
Yes, I'm curious about interns this summer. Is that not going to happen? No. What's
No,
the
it's happening.
situation?
Starts next week.
Good.
Virtually.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Mary Buford. Normally PEC has a PEC Fellows program, which is it's on location for 10 to 12 college-age students. We don't think we can do that safely, so we've asked them, those that we had already accepted, if they were interested in doing a remote learning experience. We were frankly expecting a pretty high dropout rate since they had just been through a remote learning experience in their college. But in fact, it was the opposite. They were very, very appreciative that we were considering continuing. We've modified, obviously, the design of the program. It will be going for a little bit less time in terms of the weeks covered, and also we'll probably only be doing about half days of collaborative activities. So it'll actually substantively probably be just as intense. What we're eliminating is a lot of drive time. One of the features of the fellowship was field trips all over the Piedmont, and I think a lot of time was spent in communal exercises in the van. And frankly, I bet they won't miss that part. What they will miss is the chance to get together and see great places in person. And so it's incumbent on our staff and the other presenters to learn how to use technology to try to convey as much of that in person and in place as possible. One of the things we were blessed to have is a couple of drone operators, Marco Sanchez in the left corner and Hugh Kenny, and with a big H on his screen, have both gotten their licenses to operate drones, and they're quite good at it. And they've been producing some wonderful photographs and some interesting video, which we are showing in various ways, both through YouTube channel that we post to, and increasingly in story maps that are on the website, PEC website, that take you through places and try to lay out through a combination of maps and video and visuals, some of the work that we're doing in the places we think are important. So hopefully you'll take time to go look at those.
So it looks like we have, I saw a question from Natalie, and I want to welcome her. She's one of our newest board members. So I saw you virtually raised your hand, Natalie, so go ahead and.
Yeah, hi. I wanted to go back to the topic of cattle and climate change. I was wondering, from my understanding, the issue there is the release of methane from the cattle themselves. And I was wondering, what the latest research or concerns or efforts are towards that. I understand the transportation and the terrible CAFOs, but you know.
Well, we all release methane if if we're honest. So some of that we have to own ourselves.
Right.
There's research being done on whether there's any way to reduce the amount of methane from various types of ruminants. Cows have multiple stomachs. They're pretty efficient. It does matter what they eat, and it does seem that there are some supplements that can reduce significantly the percentage of their the percentage of various gases that they release. But I don't think you can ever fundamentally change the fact that they're converting vegetable matter to animal protein. So yes, you're right. There's a certain amount of this that's inevitable, and I think the recommendations that many have made, including nutritionists, is that we should be more selective in the amount of protein we eat, probably eat a little bit less, not waste as much. There's a whole lot of pieces there. But I'm nervous that the overall analysis of livestock downplays the transportation component and overemphasizes the forest clearing that is true in some parts of the country, but less true in others. Or the world, and less true in others. So buying a hamburger at McDonald's or Wendy's that is beef from Brazil where they've cleared rainforest, the footprint is huge.
Right.
Buying a hamburger from a vendor at Gilbert's Corner who's using a cow that is grown on pasture that is well maintained and has regenerative techniques, I think the impact is much smaller. And we're trying to quantify that, and that's exactly the thing that we'll be working on.
Yeah, perfect. That's wonderful. Thank you.
All right. Any other thoughts or comments? Or we don't want to hold you because it's a Friday and there's lots going on. Okay. Marco, why don't you wrap us up?
Again,
all right.
Well, guys.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for joining us. Again, this has been recorded, so be sure to share that. Not sure we'll get to that today, but hopefully next week be able to send that out with a few of the other resources that have been mentioned on the call. And we'll hopefully do another one of these at some point this year, maybe a follow-up to some of the initiatives that have been talked about. But again, I think I'm just really excited with everything that's going on, and things are changing every day. So just encourage you to stay up to date. And if you have other questions that we didn't get to or that you thought of later, Chris is always available, as are any of our staff, to answer those. So with that, I'll just thank you and hope you have a great rest of your Friday and weekend.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for joining.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.